Another flash of lightning illuminates the room, and she realizes she is not alone. There's someone there, watching. From somewhere near, she hears the rattle of chains, the fluttering of heavy cloth. Her pupils dilate, adjusting to the dark, and then she sees.
Sarah Frost, it's time to answer for your podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography, Hellspawn. My name is Pierce Light, and I'm your host, pronouns they, them, here with, as always,
George Marston, pronouns they, them, or she, her. Pierce, how's your week going?
It's going great. Thursday is my Friday, so I've had a great...
Thursday is my Friday is my favorite Loverboy song.
It's been a solid week. You know, it's basically the end of January as we're recording this. It'll be like February when it comes out, but yeah, you know, it's cold. And I'm getting over a cold, but besides that, can't complain. Got very few plans this weekend. I think just gonna kind of keep it low key. How about you?
Here, and just trying to get through this 38th week of January, as they say. All hell is breaking loose in the United States right now, and it's certainly come to my door in some weird ways. I won't get into it on the podcast, but let's just say this is serious stuff. If you don't take it seriously, it's gonna find its way to you. So my response to that has been to connect with friends and focus on my community and my family. I've been hanging out with a new friend lately. We went and saw a movie that was fun, and I've been just trying to build relationships.
Cool. Yeah, it is not a good time in our country. Feels like every day some new insane thing is happening, and then in like a couple days later they're like, well, no, not actually that, but
then another also worse thing. They're trying to genocide trans people already, Yeah. And you can leave that in. I think it's important to say that. But I won't dig into that too much because this is a podcast about someone else's miseries and misfortunes.
Todd McFarlane's.
That's exactly right. Todd the God.
So something kind of crazy is that the road to episode 50 has ended. It is here. We've arrived. This is episode 50,
That's true.
George. We've done it.
Episode 50. We did it. The
whole podcast changes now.
That's right.
We have to get a new theme song or something.
Okay.
If you want. You don't have to.
We'll see what happens.
Not something we've discussed previously. I just thought, I was like, what would be the only thing that we can really change?
Well, we'll see what happens.
All new hosts and...
Yeah, that's right. Next week it'll be hosted by two AIs programmed on my writing and your music, and it will really be a shit show.
We should just get our partners to do an episode. No context.
That would actually be awesome.
That would be
my partner
funny.
Killian does a podcast called Dick Talk. Well, they actually just changed it. It's called Smut Shame now. It's quite good.
Pretty good.
They review smut books, and they kind of hang out and make jokes about it, and they're very funny. Three very, very hilarious people. This is just a plug for someone else's podcast, but it's really good. But we could definitely get Killian and Vanessa to do an episode. That would be very funny.
Would be pretty funny. I know that V would probably want to do like an issue of The Crow, though. That's what we have to do. We get them to do like Crow number 1.
The Crow is a Spawn.
That's what I'm saying. It's not Spawnography if it's about The Crow, right? Maybe. Anyway,
that's right.
The Crow has technically appeared within the pages of Spawn because there've been a lot of ads for The Crow. So we're not that far off.
lot of Todd McFarlane toys. That Todd McFarlane original like crow toy with the like base that was shaped like the burning like the crow logo. So sick. That was
Yep.
such a coveted item in like 1998 or
It's a coveted
whatever.
item in 2025, honestly. I would get that.
Mezco. I was showing Pierce some of my toys the other day, and I have some Mezco toys. I got a Superman and a Darkseid.
So cool.
Mezco is pretty good, high-end American toy company here. Or I think they're American. Maybe they're Canadian or something. I don't care. Doesn't matter. What's important is they do a really sick Crow action figure, like an Eric Draven movie Crow. He's got like, I think he's got like a comic book style face too. And he's got like a guitar and like he's got the like light up like fiery Crow. Anyway, it's
Cool.
interesting how much I think that's cool even 30 years later.
Welcome back to Crowography.
That's right.
I would, I've never read The Crow. I've read like bits and pieces of The Crow, and I've seen the movie, but I've never read The Crow.
Oh yeah.
Like in intention with intentionality. I mean, I've like
Sure.
breezed through The Crow. The thing that this week I have been doing is revisiting the current era of the X-Men, because I read 2 issues of almost every book, and then I was like, nope, don't care about this. And then I was like, well, now we're like 9 or 10 issues in, and so I read all of NYX, and I read all of Adjectiveless X-Men, and I hate it. It's bad. It's
NYX I have liked. I have also thought it has had some pacing issues. I will say the latest issue of X-Men, whichever with 12 or 13, I can't remember, that just came out this week.
I think it's
that
only
we're
10.
recording. It might be only 10. I don't know.
The raid on
it's
Grey
pretty
Malkin?
good though.
That's
It's
a
the one
David
after
Tifton.
that.
Oh,
it's the one
I haven't
after
read
that.
it yet. That's one I haven't read yet.
It's just a Cyclops centric issue.
Well,
and it's just Cyclops basically being like, hey, guess what? I'm more hardcore than you, and I'm more badass than you, and I have better plans than you. And if you try to fuck with me, you're done.
I think the issue that I'm having with both NYX, that works for NYX more because of Kamala, excuse me, being the POV character, is like Kamala can be like a little jokey.
I think it's Kamala Khan.
Oh,
I think it's Kamala Khan and Kamala Harris. I know it's confusing.
Is it?
I guess.
All right. Well, Miss Marvel, come on the pod. Miss Marvel, come on the pod. Former vice president. You're not allowed.
Iman Vellani, come on. That'd be sick.
That would be sick.
That'd be amazing. Read some Spawn.
Yeah.
Come on. They say it Kamala in the MCU. So.
Okay. Anyway, she's a giant Marvel fan and like knows like weird little in jokes, and like it can kind of work to be like a little bit meta. To have like Hellion saying like welcome to die, like, okay, yeah, I get it. Good. That's exactly the joke for us who are in our late 30s, early 40s. Got it. That's fine.
Yep.
It's fun that she knows the reference. That's fine.
Sure.
But X-Men just does not work for me. It feels like a weird rehash of like, why are they doing what they're doing? Also, haven't we done this before? Which is Cyclops, Magic, and Magneto are on a team that's in a snowy place in a fortress that was formerly used by villains, and they are finding new mutants. Oh, I think we did this 13 years ago during Bendis's X-Men run. I think also technically that's kind of like the first X Factor is like, we're going to be a team. I know it's not totally, but like, and I love that X Factor run. Don't get me wrong. But like, what are we doing?
You know, for listeners who don't know entirely what I do outside of this podcast, my job, whose views are not reflected by this podcast.
Are you sure you haven't said that in a while?
Views. Yeah, it's good that I'm saying it again now. I'm just refreshing, just rehashing that the views of Games Radar and Newsarama are not reiterated by this podcast. The views of me are, but what I do all day is I write about Marvel. I've been writing about Marvel pretty much exclusively, not exclusively, but primarily, put it that way, for like years and years now, since forever. And we're in a period where there are certain creative directions and choices being made that are being made for, I think, cynical reasons. and I think that can only go so far. And
Hmm.
traditionally, when a Marvel regime, like a publishing regime, editing regime, or whatever, has reached the point where they're doing things almost entirely for cynical reasons, then it tends to be when big changes come. And I don't think we're that far off from a wave of change in the Marvel line. I think it really will just depend on a lot of the economic vagaries of the rest of reality.
Yeah, the current political climate unfortunately has a huge bearing on the world of Marvel comics. Also, the recent like Diamond shuttering is not good. I know that Marvel's not distributed by Diamond at this point
No, but
entirely,
it
right?
shakes
But
things up, and there's a lot of red tape with that, and it's a strange time in the world of comics. But
absolutely,
I'll say this: comics as an art form and as a medium are never going away. Much like trans people,
I was going to say
they are never going away,
they've always been
and
here.
they're only. It's exactly right. I mean, sequential storytelling
Cave
has
paintings.
existed in some form or
Yeah,
another. Cave paintings, exactly. We have urns. You can look at the Grecian urns. Anyway, but yeah, it's not going away. But I think we'll see some changes, and I think we'll see some pains in that. But I think at the other side, once we're through all that cynicism, we'll get back to a point where comics will be about creative optimism again and pushing the boundaries of an art form.
I think, and just to circle this back to Spawn, so that it is relevant, and because that's why I brought it up also in the first place,
Yeah, of course.
is that you know, I think that what you're saying when a publisher makes cynical decisions, right, and the current the current status quo of X Men is definitely positioning some. It's trying to trade nostalgia on some level. It is trying to tell a different story, but it is trying to reckon with years of storytelling that has been hard to. It is very hard to get into the X Men right now because
Yeah.
they are impenetrable. I think similarly, I think Spawn has a similar issue, right? Spawn is like a little bit impenetrable. However, if you look at the family of books that are coming out right now, and I know you're not super up on current Spawn, but when you read Scorched and Gunslinger and understand where, and even King Spawn and the main Spawn titles, and when you kind of get to see where all the pieces like live and how they interact with each other, to me, that's like when X Men is at its peak, and I think Spawn is like trying to approach that level. Whereas like there's what 13 X-Men books right now, and they just do not feel cohesive. They don't feel like a universe. NYX for what it is feels like a book written outside of the Marvel universe. Like they're in New York City and there's like no Spider-Man and there's no Fantastic Four and it's not the world outside my window. It feels like a very
I mean,
specific little
I
story
don't
that is
think it
trying to.
necessarily has to have those connections to have that feeling for me. For me, plus also, I mean, there's time for that to come.
True.
But I agree with what you're saying by and large. I think a lot of the line feels kind of aimless. A lot of it
Yeah.
feels like it doesn't have much to say. It just kind of feels like it's there to have a plot more than to have a theme or a story. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
I think also too, and this will be the last thing that I say about the X Men, is
Yeah.
that the rehabilitation of Beast is insane.
It's a strange story.
But they reverted him back, listeners. They reverted him back to '80s Beast, but that's crazy because Dark Beast could not have replaced him before like 1995. So he just like doesn't know stuff, and it's a frustrating place to put a character, and it's frustrating as a longtime reader to see a character in that spot because I very much love old Defenders comics. I love
Avengers Beast is my favorite
I was going to
Beast.
say I love the bouncing blue beast of the Avengers. He's very fun. He doesn't really fit on this team, and there are stories to tell with the fact that he doesn't fit, but I unfortunately don't think that the current story being told is doing him any favors. Anyway,
Speaking of another story being told, the story of Spawn through this
yeah,
podcast, Spawnography, which is now recording its 50th episode, which is incredible. It's been almost a year, I think, since we started recording. A little less since we started releasing episodes.
yeah,
Maybe a year by the time this is in listeners' ear holes.
Our 1 year
But
anniversary is the middle of March.
yeah, so we'll be creeping up on it by the time
Yep.
you hear this. We'll be close. But I think that's very cool. And I think it's so cool that we've got we've got a whole Spawn community all around us that we've connected with, of listeners and friends and fans, and even other podcasters, of course. We've become good buds with the Spawnverts of Respawn, the number one Spodcast. Spodcast?
This
That's not right.
podcast?
Spawncast?
It could be.
No. It's just cool to get here and to have accomplished something like recording 50 episodes of a podcast with your best bud. I think that's
Yeah.
cool. And I'm just going to be a little corny for a second and say I think that's the kind of thing we got to do. Not necessarily that the world needs more podcasts, but like you got to connect with your friends. You got to stay connected to people. You got to stay in touch, and you got to stay in each other's lives and stay focused on those important connections. And that's part of what this podcast does for me, and I love that. So
Yeah,
it's very cool to
absolutely.
have gotten to 50 episodes.
And I promise listeners, neither of us will end up in the hospital by the end of this episode, only to be healed by Spawn.
Yeah, I can't promise that. We'll see what happens.
So we got 2 more issues today. We've got Spawn number 79 and Spawn number 80. We are within what Brian Whitlow of the wonderful Spawn Reading Order calls the Devil Within arc, which is about 10 issues, 11 issues. So we're deep in the middle of that. And I'm going to get right into it if that works for you, George.
Yeah, please hit me with those credits.
Great. We're going to hit Spawn number 79. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics presents Exterminator. Story by Todd McFarlane and Brian Holguin. Pencils by Greg Capullo. Inks by Danny Miki. Copy editor and lettering by Tom Warzikowski. Colors by Brian Haberlin and Dan Kemp. Cover art by Greg Capullo and Danny Miki. Dedicated to Elaine Kolomajic, who is either Todd's mother-in-law or grandmother-in-law. I'm not sure.
A relation of his wife.
Yes. I'll read the summary of Spawn number 78. While Twitch lies in a coma, Sam unknowingly trades favors with Spawn for a miraculous recovery. Sam continues trying to solve the latest seemingly senseless murders of the homeless, but leaves the morgue with more questions than answers after the coroner shows Sam an unusual mark on the latest victim. Meanwhile, Spawn and Cog search a museum of antiquities for ancient answers to the mysteries of the murders, and they also find an image of the same mark. Later, Spawn confronts Sam and a recovered Twitch about the results of their detective work, even as another body is discovered. And this time, it's a child.
Yeah, and before we go any further with this, I just want to say up front, this 2-parter here will involve discussion of some sexualization and violence against a minor.
Yeah.
If you don't want to hear about that, I mean, it's going to be fairly pervasive throughout this 2-parter, just because it kind of focuses on a specific story. So just your warning up front. Pierce and I will do our best not to get too graphic with the details. It's not that bad, but it's here. And it's a kind of it's a bad vibe in the book.
Yeah. We talked about Seven being a big influence in the last episode. That is definitely the case here. I think, though, the thing that we were sort of enjoying about the last couple issues is that vibe felt like it was filtered a little bit. And
it's
here,
very pulpy.
Yeah, it was like pulpy. It had that kind of noir horror thing going on, but without being kind of too perverse. Maybe that's a strong word.
Lurid.
That's maybe the word I was actually looking for. And in this, we get closer to Alan McElroy, like Suture, Curse of the Spawn territory, where things are pretty dark, almost for darkness' sake. I do think that there's some sequences in here that are real horror that really work, specifically in 80. And we'll get there. But yeah.
I think it's just a tone that kind of happens. It's a lot in the art, and we'll discuss it. We'll try not to get too in depth, but we'll get to it.
Yeah.
I also want to say something that I kind of misspoke about in the last episode, and it's not a big correction. It's just when they put the stuff under their noses, that's actually a beat from Silence of the Lambs, which
Oh,
I think is another big influence on this. Like if you're talking
true.
about 90s noir horror, Seven is the one we dug into a lot in the last episode. Silence of the Lambs is kind of right there with it. Another peak film, a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
One of the greats. But yeah, it's definitely filtering in here. There's a lot of that here. There's a lot of like pastiche of different movie bits. Starting out, we have this whole thing of like this big rain falling on New York City, and there's this long monologue in the caption saying, you know, Ethan Crone, notes on a dying city. Ethan Crone being you know, technically a true crime writer or something in this, something like that.
Yeah, he's like a horror writer who's essentially, and we're not going to dig into all this narration because it does feel like it is indulging
Yeah.
the worst of the things that we kind of ping Todd
But
for.
the thing is, it's very much taken straight from like Taxi Driver.
Right.
Taxi Driver, he's writing, you know, well, someday a real rain will come and wash the streets clean. And this is saying, let it rain for 1,000 years and it will not be enough to wash clean the streets of this city. The filth is a part of us. It's in our lungs. It's beneath our skin. It stains us so deep, we'll all carry it to our graves. And it's just a lot of that. New York City is a grand opera written in blood. And
yeah, it's kind of fun, but at the same time, we're like, yeah, all right.
It's back to like stacks and stacks of narration. And I get that in this case, it's meant to be this guy's writing, but it comes off a little bulky,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's not, it's more of a recap almost. I do like the page where he's saying like, how long can its author sustain and all the action before it all comes crashing down? We talked a little bit in the last episode about mysteries being pretty tough in comics and in storytelling in general, because you always have to measure like audience expectation with the ability of the audience to figure out the thing, right? And make it feel earned when it is finally revealed, right? You reveal too much, audience already knows, they're annoyed that the characters don't know anything. Don't reveal enough, then your solution feels like it came out of nowhere and it doesn't really matter at the end. It doesn't feel satisfying. It's kind of fun to have a writer in here framing what's going on to say like, okay, like this is the balancing act that we're doing. Who's going to be the hero? Who's going to be the villain? Who will play the clown, the fool, which the clown
I
thing's
like
a little
that
bit
page
funny.
actually,
Yeah.
but there's no clown. The clown
Right.
hasn't been here in a while, which, you know, I'm not so sad we left that kind of weird half plot line behind for the moment.
Yeah. It's on a break.
I mean, it's on a break.
Yeah.
They'll get back to it. But I do like the page where it's showing, you know, each of the players,
all the major
and,
characters that are.
yeah,
that are
I think
playing
that's a fine introduction. We learn we're reminded again that there's a killer called the Exterminator who's murdering unhoused people on the streets of New York. It's gruesome. They've taken hands, they've taken eyes, and right now, Ethan Crone, who kind of looks like Neil Gaiman,
Yeah.
is
kind of writes like him too.
kind of looks like Neil Gaiman derogatory.
Always.
Is getting into a cab. He's on his way off, and he's enjoying the rain. He's on his way to the precinct where the police have none other than poor Bobby.
Yeah.
And they think that he is responsible for, if not all, then at least some of these murders, because he stole what was the guy's name?
Whistler.
Whistler's whiskey. Well, he was.
Why are you saying it like that?
Saying what? Like what?
We're not doing a Family Guy bit.
It's not a Family Guy bit. That's from Hot Rod, which is a great movie.
It's a Family Guy bit, bud.
No, they stole that from Hot Rod.
All
It
right.
came from Hot Rod first. He says, "My safe word is whiskey," and he says, "Why are you saying it that way?" And he says, "Why am I saying what way?"
No,
It's
cool
a great
whip.
movie.
Cool whip. Say cool. Whip.
Okay, that's a different joke.
That's the same joke.
But this is a joke on the sound that on that close on whatever that syllable is. It's a different joke.
It's the same joke
It's
presented
a
differently.
different. It says different. There are different words in it, and anyway, he took Whistler's.
We're here to talk about a different McFarlane.
That's right. He took Whistler's whiskey, and he Seth MacFarlane and I are, I think, from the same town. I think he's from Framingham.
Really?
Yeah, they've set part of. I don't know. Cut that fucking out. I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Where's Ted from?
I only know one Ted, and he's from San Francisco.
Fair.
Ted,
come on the pod.
Dude, we should.
We should.
No,
Found out that Ted drew a lot of magic cards.
Yeah.
That was cool. I got to play those cards now. Anyway.
Talking about our good friend Ted Nafee, artist par excellence.
Yeah.
So check out his work. He's done Courtney Crumrin. That's his big one. That I think he's still doing some stuff for that.
Yep.
So
Courtney Crumrin Spawn crossover.
Let's
do it.
Honestly, Ted could draw the hell out of some Spawn. That would be dope.
Hell yeah. That'd be really sick. Yeah. Anyway.
So he stole Whistler's whiskey.
Oh boy.
And he didn't know that Whistler was dead. Well, I guess he did know after he took it, and he was like, "Oh God, this is the lowest I've ever been." We're a couple of silly geese tonight.
Yeah, we are. And we're here with Silbert, Officer Silbert, who we met earlier, whose nickname is SOS.
And he's kind of a buddy of Sam's,
right? And they're interrogating. There's some good, there's some good patter between the two, like good cop, bad cop kind of thing. Like, when Bobby admits that he took the bottle off Whistler, he says, "What are you saying? You took a bottle off your dead pal? Didn't think to call an ambulance? Murphy, how sick is this?" Pretty sick, Silbert. In fact, I'd say I'm shocked and disgusted. Me too. You know what else is sick? Like, they just have a good back and forth that you can really read into. That's good. And then there's a lot of yelling.
So here's where things start to get kind of fucked up. And I'm going to give a slight trigger warning here, because they're trying to get Bobby to confess, and they show him Polaroids of the latest victim of the murders, who happens to be a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah. The
problem I have is that they're showing close-up shots of what's in the Polaroids.
It's pretty brutal.
Which is a 14-year-old girl stripped to her underwear with her chest ripped open, bound to the floor. It's not look, I'm going to gore like this is something that has its place in horror, I think. I'm not against all scenes of gore. I think showing it here in the context that it is meant to be a 14-year-old girl, and it's framed very luridly, it's very sexualized, it's deeply upsetting to see. And it's upsetting to Bootsy too. He says, to Bobby, he says, "I didn't hurt anyone, I swear, please leave me alone." He says, Bootsy, please help me." He's practically melting into the table now. The art of Bobby here, I think, is superlative. I think the choice to show these things up close in the context that this is a 14-year-old child is a choice that didn't have to be made. And it's one that will continue.
Yeah, I think that this scene is good in the sense that it gets across what it needs to get across.
Absolutely.
Which is how scared Bobby is, how much he doesn't know what's going on. But the choice to show the photos to us, we don't really need to see them. We can see through Bobby's reaction how bad it is.
They could show us something like a small chunk of the photo with part of the blood spatter, maybe part of her bound wrist. Maybe that's even still too sexualized. Yeah. But there are parts of this they could show that are not. It's like an old detective novel. You know what I mean? Where it's like the women in danger. And that's something that culturally I wish we were further past. I know even 30 years ago, almost, when this was out, we were even further away from being past that. But it's still jarring here. And they're going to continue to sexualize every appearance of this murder victim. They're going to show her underwear, the posing.
For a book that doesn't have much of a female presence in it, the fact that so often when there are women in it, they are dismembered or in some other way kind of sexualized. Like it's unrelenting.
Yeah,
There's no normal woman in the Spawn universe,
rarely,
except
very
Granny
rarely.
Blake.
Right.
And even
Yeah,
she gets a
and
moment where she's not sexualized, I don't think, in that flashback in 76. But
no, but she's presented as like a young and beautiful
yeah,
woman, which I mean, whatever. But here, it being a 14-year-old murder victim, and
it's
again,
rough.
it's going to continue to be every time they show her, we'll get into it as it goes on, but it's upsetting. So Bobby calls out for Bootsy. This is just crushing, like in a way that's like the Bobby part of this is like
Sad.
really well rendered. It's really well written. Like you said, we can gauge by his reaction how upsetting this is.
Yep.
And now the cops are kind of joking with each other, like, who was that other guy who heard voices? Son of Sam. We
Yeah.
talked about him before.
They kind of say, like, well, you have your one call. He doesn't think he's got anybody to call. But in the last issue, he did receive a phone number for Sarah Frost, who's doing the homeless outreach. And as Silbert goes out into the hallway, he sees Sam getting a candy bar from the snack machine. And they're kind of chatting. And Sam is like, that guy didn't do it. I don't really know why you're wasting your time. Silbert's like, he was there. We have his prints. It makes sense. We can place him at the first crime scene. And he goes, but it's a dead end. Like, I know you have to do something because like the pressure's on. The city is aware of this story and what's going on, but you're barking up the wrong tree, basically.
And he says, yeah, he's talking to someone who's not there. And he says, yeah, he's talking to his friend who just died. He just lost someone. And I like this bit with Sam with the candy bar because, okay, Sam likes to eat. That's fine. But he's not like jamming the candy bars in
Yeah.
his mouth sideways and shit. He says, the guy says, I thought you were sticking to the health foods, muscle bars and all that. And he says, I am. This is a reward for my diligence. And I just like the version of Sam we've evolved into here.
A lot more confident and a lot less of the butt of the joke.
A lot less than just a walking ham sandwich. Like he's not just like farting his way through the police station here. But the guy, Silbert, finally asks him, that's not, he says, that's not all. It's not just about Bobby. What do you know about someone named Spawn? And of course, that's a big shock.
Yep. And then we also get, on the next page, a really cool Spawn with some
none other
police
than
lines.
Spawn himself. Yeah, the police lines.
Now, one of the things that because of the narration earlier, I was like, wait a second. Is the narration here also the author writing? And it's just because the narration is kind of written exactly the same because it's Todd McFarlane as Ethan Crone. It is not. It's in different bubbles, like colored
Slightly
bubbles.
different.
But they're similar enough that for a second I didn't realize. And I was like, I don't know how he knows all this, but he doesn't.
So another double-edged sword in this 2-page spread. Spawn is investigating the crime scene, something we haven't really seen him do before, and I kind of like the beat that's coming up here. But he's sort of doing like psychometry. He's like reading the room literally, and kind of assessing what happened to the murder victim, the 14-year-old girl whose name was Fawn. So here's the thing. It says a child. A runaway grew up the hard way long before her time, but still it is a child's thoughts that fill her last moments on earth. I want to go home. I want my mommy. Please, God, let this be a bad dream. And it goes on to describe sort of what happens. Now, here's the thing. The writing, I think, is extremely effective here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Child murder, joy, whatever, like that alone, if you have a problem with the idea of a story that depicts child murder, you will not like this writing. You will not like any of this. Fiction often reflects the worst things about us, so I don't have an issue with it showing that or talking about that rather, and the way it discusses it. The way it shows it is just this weird, lurid upskirt shot of this girl.
Could
and
have
it's
done
like,
this page without that, and it would have been fine. It is like a
you could
close-up on Spawn's eye. It is Spawn by the chalk outline, him touching it. It's a little bit of what he's, the glimpses of what he's seeing. So like a hand over her mouth while she's crying. We see a fist raised with a bloody knife. If you just got rid of this weird little upskirt shot, it would be
I would
totally fine.
honestly say maybe take away the picture of her face with the hand over it too. And again, it's that this is depicting a 14-year-old child. I know there is a contingency of people who will say that images are not people. I agree. And that I personally, as a matter of my own moral fiber, don't love seeing the sexualized murder of a child
Agree.
depicted at all. And again, it's not that I'm like, they should never have a victim who's a child. Okay, I can accept that. I even think the writing around it is good. I think it's the imagery that will continue that really does it in. On the other page, as Spawn continues his investigation past his vision there,
Has one of my favorite little bits.
I love this.
Yeah.
He turns to a little roach walking across the floor and he says, What about you?
I like that
What
he
did
says,
you
come
see?"
here.
Yeah,
He commands it, and it because it's on the ground, and then he commands it. He says, come here, and he puts his finger down, and it crawls onto his finger.
Yeah. And the art here is great. I love that inset panel of Spawn with the roach on his finger. That's great. And then the next panel of Spawn bent over like Dracula, looking like fucking Scars, looking like a Skarsgård here.
Yep.
Are we gonna? No.
What?
Nothing. Never mind. Nope.
Count Orlok Spawn crossover?
Yeah. Oh, that'd be sick.
Count Sporlock.
Count Sporlock. I don't like that.
Warlock's more of a Wolfram.
Yeah, he kind of is.
He's a vampire.
But Spawn's cooler than Wolfram, and Wolfram's not cooler than anyone. So Spawn's all hunched over here, and he dives into the shadows. The police are like, hands up, because, like, he's in a crime scene. He dives into the shadows as the police fire. He whips one of the guys with a chain. Doesn't really hurt him. He just knocks him for a loop and disappears. And they're just like, we better phone this in. I didn't get a look at any of that.
Yeah. Good little Batman-y kind of, okay. I like, again, we talked about Sam being in this more confident era. I also like Spawn being in this more like, I know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm
Spawn is more of
and
a
I'm
presence
here.
here.
Yeah. And especially the last handful of issues, we've seen a little less of Spawn to allow the other characters a little bit more room to breathe. And he was a little bit passive. I like him being an active character, an active part of the story. We're going to cut to Sam hanging out with Miss Sarah Frost, and they're getting some food.
Yep, it's a nice little moment. It's a weird tray of food. It's a hamburger with some bananas.
Well, they're at a hospital. They're at the hospital, right? So that's
okay. That's
how
fair.
I assumed. I was like, oh, he just took one of everything, even though it's like dinner time or whatever.
That makes sense. That they're at the hospital. That's not exactly spelled out, but I guess it does make sense because she's working there.
Yeah,
and he's there with to see Twitch. Anyway, long story short, they're eating, they're connecting. He's saying that the first time that he knew he wanted to be a detective when he saw Joe Friday on Dragnet. She says that it was Nurse Dixie on Emergency. Never saw it, but I'm sure it's another show from another time. So there's a bit on the next page here. First off, we get another bit of like, Sam's kind of gross sometimes, but in a reasonable way where he's talking with his mouth full. And it's just kind of a cute bit. She doesn't quite hear him. This part here. So Sam is trying to open a ketchup packet with his mouth, and it blasts all over her, and he's wiping it off her face. When I was in the 8th grade, I was sitting at lunch, and I was sitting with I was sitting with a bunch of girls. And
Ooh.
Right. And they were my friends. And
Ooh.
That's right. And I was just absentmindedly twisting a ketchup packet, like one of those little foil packets like that. And I was just sitting there talking to someone, and suddenly I felt the packet go slack. And I looked over, and the poor girl that was sitting next to me, who actually happened to dislike me quite a bit, just for whatever reason, had fucking ketchup all down her face and shirt.
You
and I was like, Yeah, that's right. I sure did that on purpose. I felt so bad. I was like trying to like get her napkins and shit, and she was like, "Just leave me alone." So I feel for Sam here. Just a funny little bit that Todd McFarlane stole directly from my life. And I'm gonna have
In your
to.
case, though, it wasn't a meet cute kind of the way that this is. I know that they've already
No.
met, but this is sort of like their deepening relationship, which is kind of nice. Again, nice little moment for Sam to have a human connection with somebody that's not um, a toilet.
Yet. Yep, they're just connecting, and they're both talking about how they really just want to help people and clean things up. So from there, we cut to a press conference, and the police are saying that they believe that the exterminator is working alone. We see that what Ethan Crone is hanging out in the back, just like learning about the story, presumably for his reporting or whatever he's doing. We get a little check in with Spawn and Cog,
Great
where
page.
Cog is saying, it's a great page. Spawn's cape is huge. The city looks great. This is an awesome shot. Um, I like the way I like Cog's face here. Yeah, this is a great page. Cog is saying, "Tread cautiously. I have suspicion that there's more to this bloody mess than we can guess." And Spawn's just saying, "Damn it, you don't understand. I can still feel this girl inside me.
Yeah.
I can see what she saw. I know what she felt. I feel her terror."
I really like this sort of man thing, the shadow. I can feel the horror that lurks, the evil that lurks within the city. It's cool. It feels like Spawn, and it feels like an obvious next level for him.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as Cog is like, oh, you are cool enough to see the Spawn layer that I have. Finally, it's a nice little evolution of the character. I like that it distracts Al from the thing that he's usually obsessed with and
Right.
kind of pushes him in a different direction.
Gives him more of a connection to the things around him rather than just to his own bullshit. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
And like that Spawn is saying, someone's going to pay for this, Cog. I swear I will find whoever is doing this and I will make them suffer. No one else will die on my watch. Very Spider-Man kind of moment,
I was going
except
to
for the
say,
make them suffer. Um,
I love a no one dies proclamation
right.
because for all characters, and Spider-Man is certainly one, that it doesn't work that way, buddy. You can no one dies at the moon as much as you want, and
Yeah.
it's it's almost a trope at this point for the hero to say no one dies, and it's like something's gonna happen. It's fun. One thing I want to mention about the art on this kind of bunch of pages feels a little bit like deadline art. I'm gonna say that because there's a lot of swaths of backgrounds that are just kind of yellow and no
Yeah.
details.
There's a lot of not background pages, not a
Yeah,
lot of.
and to the point where if there wasn't at least like one panel that gave you like an inkling of where they are, you'd have no bearing on anything else. So it's not super noticeable. Great job, Greg and Danny Miki, for not making it too noticeable. I do think that we really do have to stop with like the khakis and the coloring. It's like khaki
A
and also
little bit
and the
overdone.
yellows. I think it
Yeah.
just really doesn't work for the book, especially when you have
This like
characters that are almost the same color. Their skin coloring and clothing is the same. That's why these darker pages with Spawn and Cog look so much better.
also the background pops a lot there
Yeah.
because you get the city down below. Yeah, I will say the baby shit brown that's kind of like the
Yep.
background of this Sam and Twitch page here is not great, but they're investigating these murders by the exterminator, and it turns out, according to Twitch, there was as with all the other victims, there was almost no physical evidence left by the killer, but in the girl's stomach they found one thing, a single pearl. And again, that's kind of a very like Silence of the Lambs kind of thing, like finding
Yeah.
the thing inside her. We'll find out it's not quite what's going on here, but
Which makes a connection to a note, to the note saying like, oh, casting pearls before swine is in one of the notes. And so maybe it's a connection to that. I like that they're being
right.
detectives.
they're detecting, and it's cool, and I'm always a sucker for that. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a detective so bad. I wanted to solve crimes, and I realize now that that's not necessarily something that's generally possible to do. I'll get into my anti-criminology rant later, but whatever.
Kind of went the other way. Be
Anyway,
gay, do crimes.
that's right, exactly.
So
So the other connection here, the other revelation from Twitch is that Sarah Frost, the friend of Sam's here who runs the outreach that Bobby was trying to get in touch with, had contact with the girl Fawn before she died. It says that social services set her up with the outreach program, but she apparently refused help, wouldn't show up to appointments. Perhaps you could speak to Miss Frost, see if she remembers anything. Sam says, I could do that. So Sam is like,
Gets all
I guess I
gussied
could
up.
probably go around there. Yeah, we gotta like montage, like a getting ready montage of Sam's like comb and is like he's doing the breath spray and he's like got a bunch of little drooping daisies and his hair's all slicked back, handsome Sam. We love a handsome Sam. And he's kind of rehearsing what he's gonna say. But they're closed. And just as he's realizing they're closed, he also realizes that Bobby is sitting outside and he's looking bad. He is looking like he's maybe got alcohol poisoning or something, and he's kind of frothing at the mouth. He's in trouble. So this is where things start to heat up going into the next issue because we're about to get a big revelation here. Sam grabs Bobby and drags him. He shoulders open the door of the clinic and drags him inside. He's laying him down. He's trying to call the police. There's a narration here. It says things will start moving very quickly now. You can be sure of that. All events are rushing headlong toward their inevitable conclusion. The pieces are all in place. The course is set. Certainly a pawn or two may have to be sacrificed, but the end game is near. We could use that as a quote too, but the podcast is near. I like the one we did. But he's trying to get Bobby help, and as he does, he goes into Sarah Frost's office, and what do we see but a crazy serial killer murder wall where she has nailed up the hands and the heart of some of the other victims, the heart being the heart of the 14-year-old girl. This was ripped from her chest. And it certainly looks like Sarah Frost is the exterminator.
Which leads us to Spawn number 80. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics presents The Cleansing. Plot by Todd McFarlane and Brian Holguin. Story by Brian Holguin. Pencils by Greg Capullo. Inks by Danny Miki. Copy editor and lettering, Tom Orzechowski. Colors by Brian Haberlin and Dan Kemp. Cover art by Greg Capullo and Danny Miki. Dedicated to my favorite person, Amy Gittleman. That's what it says. She's not my favorite person. I'm imagining that might be Brian Holguin writing that. I looked up Amy Gittleman, couldn't find anything about her.
Okay.
Also, before we get going with this issue, really cool cover.
That is a great cover. Spawn with his arms raised, with a big like burst of green energy, and Sam and Twitch standing in front of him with their guns out. Pretty cool.
Twitch notably without his bandage around his head.
Yeah, because he still has a bullet lodged in his noggin.
Yep.
We open on Spawn perched on a chimney with Sam and Twitch in the rain. This is great, and I'm loving the like weird horrified Batman Gordon kind of relationship here. It's great. It's great.
This is a great page. And also, as opposed to so many issues that open with a splash and like a shit ton of narration, this is so, again, lately we've been talking about how if we were reading this month to month, we'd be like, oh, I can't wait to read the next one. If I got this at the shop, I probably would read it before I even left. And to open on Sam just saying, like, one, this excellent image that should be a poster, but also Sam just going, yeah, I'm positive we got our killer.
It's so effective. It tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
I love that the little eyes on Spawn's cape are also glowing. His epaulets there. And Spawn says, do the police know? Sam says, no, we came straight to you just like you asked. Spawn says, good. Give me half an hour, then call the cops. Twitch says, do you mind if I ask why? And Spawn says, because I goddamn said so. That's
Very
why.
Batman, especially with the rain happening. Very.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Very
also
Frank
we get.
Miller-y Batman, really.
Yeah.
It's the
Especially.
goddamn Spawn.
And
but this whole sequence is great. It's very moody. It fits. It's just so good. The artwork's so good. The writing is just the right tempo.
Yep.
There's not like bags of columns of fucking captions.
Although
here.
there will be
Right on the next page. So there's this long monologue about how people don't understand that
the nature of killers
that's right.
That the world needs to be cleansed, and that the city is a lot like a person if you think about it. It's basically a murderous Sex in the City monologue.
Yeah, basically. And what we see is Sarah Frost getting in the shower. Once again, Sarah Frost here, who is apparently, to our knowledge, the Exterminator, and I qualify that for reasons that will be understood by the end of this issue, is like getting out of the shower, and she will be again sexualized throughout this in ways that are kind of like luridly weird.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. But she says, okay, it says Dr. Sarah Frost emerges from the shower. Her 7th of the day. She feels renewed, almost reborn. She drinks in the filtered, rarefied air. It's free from the toxic taints of the city, the toxic grime that fills its skies, the sickening scent of other people. She feels alive and radiant beneath the warm glow of halogen lights. It's only at these moments she feels truly safe, truly comfortable inside her skin. That comfort will prove to be short-lived. And as that monologue is going on, she's drying her hair, and a tiny little bug starts crawling on her skin. She starts freaking out as more and more bugs start crawling out of her hair and out of her robe and stuff, and she's trying to get it off. This is a very like Tales from the Crypt kind of feeling here.
Yes, and it harkens back to what we saw with the Freak a little bit too. You know, we have a little bit of precedent for Spawn dealing with a threat in this way, which was horrifying when he did it to the Freak. It's a little worse this time.
It will be. So I love this panel on the next page of her laying on the floor with only her eyes like popping out of the shadow. And then you see the close up on her iris, and it's the silhouette of Spawn. And again, just another upskirt shot, basically. This just, it's so frustrating because I'm reading this comic and I'm like, yes. Why?
Yeah. It does take you out of it a little bit because you're like, there's no need for this. It doesn't add anything to the story. And listen, listeners, we're not prudes or something. We're not trying to say like you shouldn't have sex or sexy things in comics or
not at all.
Or women or men or whatever. That's not what we're getting at. What we're getting at is that like it doesn't add anything to the story here. It's just kind of like earlier when I said every time we see women, they are put in this position where they are mutilated or sexualized in some way or objectified. And this is just continuing that theme. We understand that it is a little bit of the tropes of the time. Yes. Yeah. Understood.
Of course.
However, it's unnecessary.
I just personally feel uncomfortable when sex and death are combined too much in one moment, because
it does feel a little bit like moralizing about sex in that way, because like, well, she's a murderer.
Right. She's also being victimized here.
Right.
And it's the sexualization of someone who is being who is the victim of something.
It's a little more complicated, as we'll find out.
It's complicated. Complicated. And it's not even that. It's just like, you don't need that shot. If her underwear wasn't showing like that, nothing would be lost from this page.
Yeah.
And what is there to be gained from it is only one thing, and it's not something I'm always comfortable with in this context.
Yeah.
Um, Sam and Twitch are sitting outside waiting. They're looking at their watches with their coffee, and he says, "How long has it been now?" And Twitch says, 4 minutes. And they're like, "Oh God," they're like having a hard time waiting to like call the officials to call this in, not knowing what Spawn's actually doing in there and if it's going to cost him the case.
I like the dynamic between Sam and Twitch here, like kind of a little back and forth, because right now Sam is really upset. He knows that he's done the right thing arguably the right thing in exposing Sarah as the killer, because he knows it to be true. And as readers, we know that to be true at this point. And Twitch is kind of making jokes to sort of lighten the mood, a little gallows humor. And Sam is like not biting his head off totally, but like he's just sort of like, dude, what gives? Like, can you lay off? Which is not a position we see Sam in often. And Twitch is
Right.
quick to be like, hey, I'm just kind of trying to take the edge off a little bit. Like, this is crazy, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know that you're not happy about it. It says a lot about their friendship. And again, I really just enjoy the deepening of that relationship and their sort of dynamic. It's a different dynamic than we usually see from them. And should I say dynamic one more time? Dynamic.
They're a dynamic duo.
You
So
just
this
come up with
next
that?
page, it's a brand new phrase that I just coined in this
We should
moment
keep
about
using it.
Sam and Twitch. Yeah. You know what? We could be the dynamic duo if no one's using it.
Hmm.
So I love this shot here of her like trying to crawl away of Sarah Frost trying to crawl away from Spawn, and he's like stepping towards her out of the darkness with his hand outstretched. He
Very
looks
cool.
like a horror movie monster. We're reaching the point where Spawn is almost like a spectre type of character, where he's like the agent of vengeance, wreaking this like sort of nemesis like appropriate vengeance on each person that he encounters. Here, he grabs Sarah Frost's face and basically reads her mind, so sees all the shit that she's done, all the murders she did. 5 homeless persons gruesomely murdered, mutilated by her hand. She remembers the day it all became clear to her. She had tried so hard to help them, but so many had refused that help. Such persons don't deserve to live, don't deserve to share the same air and sunlight as the rest of us. And then the voices came. They told her she was right, that it was up to her to change things, that it was the only sane thing to do. The screams of her victims echo in her ears, their pain and suffering quake through her bones. Her body racks and convulses with agony. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing the severed head, we see the severed hands, we see the plucked out eyes, we see this hypodermic needle that we can assume she used to like poison or kill people. The thing that I want to point out here again, though, is this very lurid image of her heaving breasts coming out of her fucking robe with the eyes,
I was just
the
gonna say
floating disembodied eyes
it's a little
staring right at her
hilarious.
chest.
It's a little
It
funny.
is kind of funny, but again, it's got that like, okay, this is going to be an ironic thing to say. It's got that kind of feeling of like, this is what Frederick Wortham was terrified of.
That's fair. Here's the thing.
Now, the irony is, I don't agree with Frederick Wortham, and I don't agree with moralizing in that way, and I don't think it's like a detriment to society to have to see disembodied eyes staring at tits or whatever the fuck. But like, it just stands out in a comic where sometimes it doesn't need those things to make its point.
It stands out here also because this is a poorly laid out page. This page
Right.
sucks. I understand that the disembodied nature of the things that we're seeing are because the way that Spawn's sort of psychometry works is that he gets fragments. However, he is touching the person who did all these things, who has the memories of them. So theoretically, it wouldn't have to be like this. There's a different way to lay this page out. We've talked a little bit about deadline pages before. This certainly feels like one. Like, hey, got to get 4 things onto the page right now. To hell with panel borders. And, you know, but the eyes are a little funny. It's too much for what it is, but
it looks like a parody of what it is.
Right. And that I do think takes a little bit away from the tone between Sam and Twitch, the tone of the story in general, where there's a deep sadness in these issues, you know, but that's why the luridness doesn't work. Not that would normally work, or I'm saying that there's necessarily a way that it could. although I'm sure that it could somehow.
Yeah.
But here it just feels out of place. So this feels so silly that you're like, okay.
Okay. This page right here, where Spawn is like magically torturing her, is exactly the reason why when there's like it starts with the another like underwear shot. Here's why
This page is
it's
better.
upsetting to see that. It's a better page. It is a better page, but here's why I don't like that linkage. Because when we read the text, I think it'll be clear. Okay?
Yeah. Yep.
He says, "How does it feel, Sarah, to be so helpless, to know that no one is coming to your rescue?" And she's saying, "Please stop." And he says, "To know your pathetic life is at an end." And she says, "Please stop." And he says, "No, we're not going to stop." And the thing is, what he's saying, "No, we're not going to stop," is, I'm not going to stop punishing you for murdering these people. The art is sexualizing this process in a way that makes it so much more lurid and makes the dialogue read in a way that is far more prurient than I think is intended. And I think that's why when you sexualize these moments, it takes away from the horror of it, because it leaves you with some reservation of just losing yourself in the horror of the moment.
Question for you. Do we think that this is framed in this way because there's a thing that Spawn is missing? If I'm trying to like give the creators all a benefit of a doubt here, and also I love the rendering on this page. I think the inks are awesome.
I do too. I love Spawn like lording
So cool.
over her with his magic and shit. That panel looks awesome.
Love the like straight like the line work, the very thin lines on his eyes and also on his one big boot. But are we supposed to get that he's missing something? And we're going to find out that he is. That things are not exactly as they seem, because the way that he's acting is a little bit Spawn Across America, right? It's a little bit like, oh, I'm going to do this, but I'm maybe not seeing the forest for the trees.
Well, so, okay, I think we're going to learn something here, and I have a speculation about how this issue ends. I don't think that he's wrong. She did do these murders, I think, because he's like seeing that. And the next page after this, again, starts off, okay, it's telling the story of the girl. She was on the street 3 nights ago, and you see Sarah pull up to her, and you see Fawn from the back, and you just see her like, this page is black and white with red accents, and the red accent is on a 14-year-old girl's underwear. Yeah. Why?
Yeah, it just doesn't have to be.
It's just compounding.
I do think it is to, again, like really drive home that she wasn't in a good spot, because the implication is that she's a sex worker.
Right.
You know, and that's what this shot is.
Yes, you know? Absolutely it is. Again, though, the problem I have with it is that it doesn't have, I don't need to see a 14-year-old girl being sexualized, even if it's in a comic.
I agree.
You know?
We do see Sarah's kind of turn to violence here, though. And we do see that as she stabs Fawn grabs at her necklace, and those are the pearls from earlier. So this is confirmation, if we didn't already have it, that was definitely Sarah, because we get a Frank Miller not knowing how pearl necklaces work. Although it makes more sense for Sarah to have fake pearls than for Martha Wayne.
Why'd you say that name?
Listeners who don't know what I'm talking about, pearl necklaces are knotted in between each pearl. So pearl necklaces, unless they're fake, don't explode the way that Martha's did in year one. Year one?
Yeah. Year one. Now, it's interesting to note that Sarah's eyes turn red and demonic here in one of these panels, and that could be artistic license, but I think it's more than that, and we'll get into that. So Spawn is like, well, tell me why, what were you afraid of? What is it scares you the most? What is it that makes you scream? And he learns that it's bugs. We learned earlier that she's got some kind of, obsessive cleanliness, and he takes advantage of that by covering her in insects. Now, again, these 2 pages I love. Unabashedly love these pages. She is like tearing at her hair as the bugs start crawling out of her. the pose of her like doubled over as she's like trying to like claw at her hair. It says, as Sarah Frost experiences her blackest nightmare brought to life, something in her mind switches over. She says, "I'm begging you to stop it." And he says, "Shut up. You're not allowed to beg." And she says, it says, "It was her all along. She sees that now. The voices only told her what she wanted to hear, and somehow she knows they're now laughing at her." The insects continue to multiply, covering every inch of her flesh. And how could I have done this? She's saying. She runs to the kitchen, she grabs Raid, and she's just blasting her face with can after can of Raid. Her mouth is clogged with vermin, her tongue weighted down by countless insects.
I love her side profile on this page. I love the colors
Yes.
there. It's again a little Chris Picciolo, Tim Townsend-y,
Yes, absolutely.
and it's really, really, really great. Love to see that.
Her hand reaching up all covered in insects.
Yeah.
This whole sequence is great. And it works on just a straight horror level. The only thing I don't like is, again, that kind of baby shit brown background that kind of comes in.
It works a little bit better because it has that blue in the front, but it's not good.
But if this was all black, like
so
all
much better.
dark for the horror. Anyway, she seems to have drowned in bugs and bug spray, basically. Silbert and the cops arrive 45 minutes later. And Sam is like, "Hey, Silbert." And Silbert says, "I don't know how you clowns did it, but you actually managed to solve a real case. Thanks for us making us look bad." Sam says, "I just followed my gut. Was she really the killer?" And it says, "No doubt about it. She had files. There's all the evidence. We saw all this stuff." And it's funny. Silbert's two of the guys say, "Hey, Twitchy, how you doing, man? Good to see you back on your feet." And he's like, "Hey, good to see you. How you been?" And they say, "How you feeling?" They let you take that bullet home with you. And he says, "In a manner of speaking, it's right where they left it," which is so, I mean, if you had a bullet in your head and you were fine. That's right. That's what they say. The man with the hollow point brain. He says, "It's the source of all my powers." The dialogue here is great.
Yeah, it's fun. I do think that Holguin, and we really get to credit Holguin on this one more than Todd. It's snappy, right? It's snappy in that, like, this is how I expect cops to talk. Let's get through it. I love. I'm sad for Sam, but I love Sam when he says, like, "Just followed my gut." He's usually a lot. You're surprised almost that he's not boasting more, because normally he would be. But for him, he's really lost something here in losing Sarah, the only woman that we've seen to this point who actually takes any interest in him, and that he actually liked in some way.
Yeah.
And it's a nice little bit of depth that's added here. Yeah. And I like this rendering of his face. He's so resigned,
He is.
And they go and check out the body, and she is on the floor, but there's no bugs. It's just
she's
her
just covered
with
in bug
scratch
spray.
marks and bug spray, and she's frothing at the mouth. And
now, I can't tell if it's that there never were bugs or if that Spawn took them all when he left, and I'm thinking it's the latter.
I think it's tough.
It could go either way.
You know what? They have to be imaginary. The roach spray would have killed some of the bugs if they were real.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's fair.
So they have to be fake.
So Sam says it's a regular riot, and I like the guy says, "Who crapped in your coffee? For a couple of third-rate dicks who just made their careers, you don't sound too cheery." And Sam says, "Well, I guess multiple homicides don't make me crack up the way they used to." And then he looks at I think it's the skin on the back of her neck.
It's like behind her behind her hair, or behind her ear.
And he sees the same symbol that we've seen before.
Dun, dun, dun.
On her flesh. So, they go outside. We see the talking head reporter is there trying to cover the crime scene.
Finally, not a talking head. That's cool.
Yep.
And Silbert's just saying, like, yeah, this is who got him. So this is who got the Exterminator, and they're the press is mobbing them a little bit. Meanwhile, though, we see Ethan Crone just following around the press corps, I guess, looking for some inspiration. And
very Truman Capote, in cold blood, kind of like an author following the case, trying to catch little bits. Spawn is back with Cog, and Cog says, "I managed to decode more of the passage in the strange marking you saw in the morgue." And Spawn says, "It's over, Cog," and Cog says, "That's just it. I don't think it is over."
Love those 3 panels.
I know, that's great. Let me get this little epilogue. Sam and Twitch admiring their picture in the paper, accepting. Are they getting their badges back, or is that an award?
I think it's an award.
Yeah, a commendation.
Yeah.
I think that makes more sense. It's just the way they're holding them, they look like police badges in the drawing. This is so funny. He says, Sam says, "We're going to be the Tiffany's of detectives. Upscale offices, celebrity clientele, fat assignments." And Twitch says, "Fat?" And Sam says, "PHAT. You know, cool, excellent, superlative." That's what all the kids are saying these days. And Twitch says, "That doesn't mean you have to, sir."
I really also like, I mean, I love that little bit. And also it's nice that Sam's kind of back to normal a little bit. But I really love in the newspaper, it says, "Two brave warriors of truth, honor, and the American way. But instead of bringing you Ted Nugent and Roddy Piper, we'll talk about Sam and Twitch." What?
Amazing. So it doesn't say that. I don't have that in mind.
Wait, really? Underneath the photo of them in the... Oh, well, that's in the original...
there's no caption.
Oh.
There's no caption in there. Show me yours.
It's like right in the...
Oh, wow. Look at that. They took out the text on that panel.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Wow.
Maybe they didn't want to have names in there.
Maybe Ted Nugent.
This is...
sued.
Oh, fuck Ted Nugent.
True.
Anyway, they see there's a package by the door, and in a moment that can only be described as an homage to a movie we've mentioned literally hundreds of times, I think, at this point, at least 7 times, is a box. And what's in the box? Somebody's head.
What's in the box? Not Gwyneth Paltrow this time, though.
Nope. I don't know whose head that is, actually.
No, it's a random... It almost looks like the freak, but not really.
Yeah, it says, I don't get it. What does it mean? And Twitch says, "I don't know, sir. I don't know." But there's writing on the wall, literally, that says, "Sorry, ladies, you bagged the wrong loser. Our fun is just beginning. I'm back. Billy." And Sam says, "This is bad." Okay, I'm going to say, I don't know what's happening. I don't have the spoilers. Haven't looked it up. Haven't read ahead. My theory is that it's like a spirit form Billy Kincaid who is possessing people, and that's the voices that were in Sarah Frost's head. Am I right? Am I wrong? We'll have to read on to see.
Yeah, we won't find out till next week. It's such a better way to end an issue than the Talking Heads.
Yes.
I know we got one of those endings recently. This, again, we have talked about the things that we didn't like about this issue, but overall, I think that they are effective. They could have been executed slightly differently from an artistic standpoint. And had they been, I think that we would have probably been singing their praises a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. But overall, pretty good couple issues. Yeah. And I'm really enjoying the Spawn Sam Twitch dynamic right now. I'm really enjoying the Spawn and Cog dynamic right now. Really enjoying how Spawn's using his powers and what he's out there doing. So
yeah,
it's an interesting time.
So let me get into some back matter. First, I'm going to go in the blah, blah, blah of number 79, where Terry Fitzgerald lets us know that worldwide sale of Spawn comics in a multitude of different languages and formats has surpassed 125 million copies. Now, considering that the first issue sold like 1.25 million copies, and we're now almost 80 issues in, we can see that that's slowed down just a little bit.
Just a bit.
And that was just in the United States. So still pretty cool. Oh, this is an annual year-end wrap-up. So the guys in New Jersey are busy working on 1999 figures. Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, Ozzy, Movie Maniacs 2, and Metal Gear Solid, with others to be announced at a later date. Keep your eyes peeled on the end cap column for further details.
I just remembered I had an Austin Powers action figure.
Really? Groovy,
yeah, I
baby.
sure did. Yeah.
Somebody stop me.
Yeah, that's right. Vaping.
He talks a little bit more about just licensing deals and stuff. It's so funny that this is included. It's so funny that Terry just gets to give updates on the business
Yeah.
because also of what like Spawn fandom has evolved into, where there's like so many collectors. Like this is stuff that they do want to
Yeah.
know about, right? So
Yep.
if we get into the spawning ground, the first letter says, "To whom it may concern. As we were walking through our town's local Walmart today, we came across some, quote, toys that were manufactured and or distributed by your company. As we looked at them, we became increasingly offended and decided to write a letter of disapproval to you concerning them. The toys were the Spawn series, the Psycho Circus Kiss series, and the movie Maniac series. These toys are horrible, unbelievably graphic, and demented. They promote the dark, evil side of man's imagination and subtly influence innocent children to embrace negative concepts such as violence, murder, and unlawfulness as socially acceptable norms for today's society.
Hell yeah.
Toys shouldn't have fake blood painted on their axes and knives. Toys shouldn't be made to look like murderers, whether they are fictitious or not. Toys such as yours shouldn't be sold to children under the age of 50. Please forgive us if we sound overly critical of your toy products. We're sure you probably produce excellent toys that are fun and appropriate for children. But when we hear stories of children and teenagers murdering their parents, siblings, friends, and schoolmates, and later admitting that fictitious characters like Jason Myers, Freddy Krueger, and Leatherface,
Jason Myers.
yep, influenced them to do what they
Christians.
did, it upsets us even more when companies continue to produce movies, posters, and toys irresponsibly like this. Please understand we are not nutcases or anything close to it. We are
Oh, okay.
we are Christian parents and pro family advocates who hope that one
Oh.
day America will wake up to the violence and bloodshed around them. We humbly ask that you please stop making such immoral toys and start focusing on the toys you already make that inspire and bring happiness. Our sincere thanks for taking the time to read our letter. Sincerely, Frederick Wortham. No, Christopher A. and Rachel L. Burke, LeGrand, Oregon.
Well,
Hilarious.
first off, let me just say to you, madam and sir, that Tom McFarlane doesn't make other toys.
Yeah, this
And
is it.
second of all,
You saw all of them.
and second of all, the middle third of that letter is about the coolest thing anyone's ever said about action figures. So let me rush
the
out
children
and
under
buy
50
some of
bit
these.
is
like,
really funny.
I know.
So, here's what Todd says. Let's see if we can make a few comments about this letter, although it's highly unlikely that either Christopher or Rachel is reading the letters column of the Spawn comic book, given the comments they made above. It still might be
they'd hate it.
interesting to make some commentary about some of the ideals they write about. We occasionally read similar letters and have these conversations at conventions. I have to say I disagree, or am of the opposite opinion of what is stated here. I've always had a problem with the idea that somewhere along the line, the bits and pieces of information out in society have a direct influence on everybody at the same rate, or that any exposure to bad ideas makes somebody bad. I couldn't disagree more. I also believe that the only way you know whether something is good or not is if there's a bad example of it. I'm not saying that my toys or comic books are good or bad, but lessons can be learned from negative events. So let's take the problems of our dear President Clinton. You can say that because of people / the media talking about his illicit affair over and over and over and over, the kids are now going to grow up to have affairs. Or you can say that because it was exposed as a bad thing, children of the world will make the educated decision that what he did was wrong. When they grow up, they won't. They won't do that and damage their own personal relationships as he did, thereby exposing themselves to the ridicule that the president has. Therefore, out of a situation that could be deemed negative, there's silver lining here. The other big concept that's a problem for me is I'm somewhat curious as to how people like Jack the Ripper, Adolf Hitler, Genghis Khan, and all these barbaric people that existed throughout history became what they were. They were never exposed to Beavis and Butthead or Ren and Stimpy or rap music.
Well, the original Beavis and Butthead was first published in newspapers in 1913.
Oh,
so actually,
yeah.
that was actually a big influence on Adolf Hitler.
Or any of my products, and they still somehow turned into nutcases. The answer is that if a person is already off center, has had a bad upbringing, or has had no family values given to him, that child potentially isn't well and won't respond to the structure of society. Some of the things we do in the entertainment world might potentially exacerbate their condition. Unfortunately, to go into any artistic endeavor knowing that you must make it come to the lowest common denominator, i.e., all the screwed up people in the world, and build from there, is really a very restrictive spot where I choose not to go. I put out ideas that everyone doesn't agree upon, but those of us that are somewhat sane and semi-balanced look at them and make a personal decision as to whether or not they want to be involved in the ideas my company conveys. If they don't, they can just walk away from my product and not give it a second thought instead of worrying about an idea they don't personally approve of, and henceforth demand that the rest of the world be deprived of something they personally don't like. The problem is that then you have to find ideas that about 6 billion people on this planet all agree upon. And the truth is, other than it's nice to breathe air, I don't think we've got that much common ground. As a parent, I make parental decisions, and so should you. And we'll let the rest of the world dictate what is popular and what isn't. Thanks.
Let me tell you, the Burks there are probably feasting in 2025. They're probably reading the newspaper with fucking smiles on their faces and boners in their trousers. They're
Yeah.
just loving the fucking. Anyway, I like Todd's response there. I definitely agree that reading and seeing weird, bad, scary stuff doesn't make someone bad. And even writing and creating those things doesn't necessarily make someone bad. Good people make bad art. Good people
Yeah.
depict bad things. And that's something, well, we talked a lot about the way the art sexualizes some of the characters in this issue. And I don't think Greg Capullo is a bad person for that.
Yeah.
I think he made some ill-advised artistic choices on an issue of Spawn 28 years ago or whatever,
Yeah. And his career is fine, and he seems like a great guy. So
yeah,
we're not trying to make a moralistic judgment based off that. And also, I don't think that seeing these couple of images that we did have a problem with, I don't know, drove anybody to.
No, I don't think these pages influenced anyone to do any bad thing or like gave anyone a weird sexual complex that turned them into a murderer. Nothing like that. I don't think that's something that really happens. I think that people make those connections because when someone is a, let's say, violent psychopath murderer, they like to make excuses for their behavior, and they often say things like, "Oh, I was reading detective novels and I would get," and it's like, yeah, well, you liked that because you're a creep. You didn't become a creep because you liked that.
Right.
And also, liking those things doesn't make you a creep, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if a creep likes that stuff and it's part of their creepiness, then I'm talking in circles. But you know what I'm saying?
Totally. No, I hear you. There's another letter that is like, I'm disgusted to hear that you're placing certificates PG-13 on the movie Maniacs line on action figures that used to be considered children's playthings. And also, why are you making Danger Girl toys? Danger Girl's great. It's at the top of my reading list. Okay. But isn't it a little different than
at the time.
more gothic horror direction you're taking with Tom McFarlane Productions? Yeah, I mean, I get why it was popular.
All those cliffhanger books were interesting, man. The Battle Chasers, of course, has like one of the weirdest comic book legacies. It's an interesting era.
So Todd basically is like, we're not putting a rating on the package of the movie Maniacs line. We're just putting out 2 versions, so older kids can like a more mature version of Leatherface with blood on its accessories, but mom might not want Junior to have that version. So they just did a bloody version and a not bloody version. That's just the difference. Now, there's another letter here that says, like, Todd, I've been a devoted follower of Spawn since day one, enjoy it thoroughly, but saw you have a co-writer. I was like, what the hell? He's not writing the whole thing. I quickly got over that when I got my hands on issue 75. This is the best issue of Spawn I've ever read. You and Holguin are the perfect team. I personally found the whole Spawn turning back into Al Simmons storyline rather dull and was getting tired of it. Then came issue 67, and I knew something big was going to happen. Who would have guessed that Bootsy the Bum was actually Balazikiel the Angel? Now we're at 77. The story with Cog was extremely fascinating. And as for Sam and Twitch, I was shocked when I turned to the last page. I will not bother asking if Twitch is dead since he did get shot in the forehead, but I will patiently await the next issue. There's a question, he had asked that question about like why less people reading comics these days. And he says, I think one of the reasons is that some of the best titles and talent other than yours are not very mainstream, and therefore people don't discover them. People that aren't already into comics only know about Superman, Batman, and X-Men, which brings everyone to the stereotypical conclusion that all comics are about do-gooder superheroes flying around the city in tights and a cape, and therefore comics are only for kids. Nobody finds out about titles such as Sin City or Preacher or Poison Elves, or even more mature and intelligent superhero books like
Poison
Watchmen,
elves.
which I don't even know what that is.
Oh, it's like a sexy elf book.
um, or even more mature and intelligent superhero books like Alan Moore's Watchmen, or of course, Spawn. For me, when I was into comics ever since I could read, I grew up on Batman and Superman and Spider-Man. Then when Spawn came around, it changed my perspective on comics altogether. Found out that comics weren't just for kids. Spawn showed me the darker, more mature side of heroes. From there, I was introduced to Sin City and Watchmen, and now I'm mostly into Vertigo and Dark Horse stuff. I always stayed faithful to Spawn and you and what you represent. I feel the same way you do about corporate Marvel and DC, and strongly believe in Frank Miller's crusade against censorship. Okay. That's going to take a turn soon. But
Yeah.
do you plan on having a definitive end to the Spawn series after a certain number of issues, such as what was done with Sandman? The Spawn animated series is a brilliant masterpiece of animation. I was hoping you would divulge any secrets as to the storyline of next season, when we can expect it, and Marv looks cool, and can we get some Preacher or Poison Elves figures? Thank you for your time. Here's what's interesting. Ian McEwan, age 16. Now, I don't know if this is the same Ian McEwan who has done work for Dark Horse, Image, TKO, Arrow Video, and now I want to find out.
Interesting.
Could be. That would be really fucking cool.
There's a long history of writers and creators getting their letters published. George R.R. Martin had a letter published in an issue of Daredevil or something, I think, at one point, way back in like the 70s. It's interesting. The letters columns of comic books are as much a part of the document of their history as every other page, I think, because it shows what the fans were thinking, what the actual community response was, what people's minds were like, when they were reading this. I think that's interesting context.
I just love seeing letters from folks that would eventually become creators. Like Kurt Busiek in X-Men is probably my favorite example of that. He's like, after that Dark Phoenix saga, I'm out. Like, that was great. Everything since then's not been good, so I'm dropping the X-Men. He ends up working at Marvel like only a few years later, which is crazy. And then, goes on to write an incredible Avengers run. So it's cool. And my other favorite story of that happening is Jeff Johns writing into Superboy and being like, wouldn't it be cool if Superboy was Clark and Lex Luthor's like combined clone? And they're like,
yeah,
you silly kid, that'll never be the thing. And then he got to write for DC and he was like, hey, guess what? So funny.
That's
so
great.
Funny. Todd says, I'm glad you had an open mind about bringing on a writer. Brian Holguin is somebody who can focus on ideas I've had floating in my head and bring some exciting elements in the book. Feel that now we can push in a direction with a little bit more focus that I, unfortunately, in my busy life, wasn't able to give to the book. Instead of bringing it down to my level, thought it'd be in the best interest of the book and ultimately you, the readers, to make sure that I can put out the best product possible. Whether it contains my input or not, it's about giving a quality effort, and my time is being split among some of the other duties I have. I have to be smart to go get people whose skill level exceeds mine and can take the book to the next level. Greg Capullo has done that for the past 4 years, drawing circles around my early issues, I believe. Now with Brian, I'm hoping he can put me to shame as well. So that's really cool.
We talked about that a lot in the last episode, where it's like one of the strengths of Todd McFarlane as a comic book maker, even more than just like an individual creator, is that he's willing to put that ego of like, it doesn't have to have Todd McFarlane. Every word is by Todd McFarlane. It's Todd McFarlane's Spawn. If Brian Holguin is writing it better, or his writing makes it better, let me put it that way, then Todd's going to go for it. And I think that's why he has endured. And that's why Spawn is still here, because Todd McFarlane didn't have an ego about himself having to put his fingers in every page.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The spawning ground, there's nothing too exciting in the blah, 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 but we do find out that it was Epic that put the Do the Evolution video up for some awards. And we are pleased to announce the Grammy nomination of Todd McFarlane as video director and Terry Fitzgerald as video producer of Pearl Jam's Do the Evolution animated video. The nomination for Best Short Form Music Video category at the 41st Annual Grammy Awards. This video has also received more than 40 million international artistic awards, which is wild because that song is awful.
It's too bad it didn't win, though, because that would make Todd McFarlane halfway to being our first comic book EGOT.
He does have an Emmy, and this is where we have to begin our campaign. One, we have to get him to do another music video so that he can actually win. But we need to call Blumhouse and make sure that this fucking Spawn movie is good enough to be made into a musical.
That's right. We need to get it on stage. We can, I know some directors, some stage directors that I'm sure would be champing at the bit. You know what? I've got no experience and no knowledge of how, so I think I'd be perfect.
Yeah, that seems like all you need is like a can-do attitude. Also,
when it comes to show business, that's what I've learned. You just need moxie, kid.
The video that wins and beats Through the Evolution is Jonas Ackerland and Madonna's Ray of Light, which is
that was a popular video.
Yeah, very popular video.
It's fine.
Oh, also you could call a Spawn musical Spawn Turn on the Dark.
Oh, that's a great name. We should stop talking about this so no one steals it.
Don't steal it. If you're listening to this, you cannot steal this idea.
You cannot
Julie
steal
Taymor,
this idea.
leave us alone.
Julie Taymor should do a Spawn movie. Have you ever seen fucking Titus Andronicus that she directed?
No.
Holy shit,
Love
man.
the band, though.
Great. Titus Andronicus is a Shakespeare play, of course, about the Roman general Titus Andronicus versus the Goths. And Julie Taymor directed a really fucking great movie version of it with Sir Anthony Hopkins.
All right. Well, I got to check it out.
It's fucking wild.
Cool. There's nothing else too interesting in the Spawning Ground. It's mostly people complaining about how come Todd hasn't made toys of their favorite character, Wolfram or the Heap or whatever. And he's just
Wolfram.
Well,
it's been 30 seconds.
Somebody
since
said
debuted.
That they love the introduction of Wolfram. I don't know what to tell you, George. I know you hate Wolfram.
I don't believe that.
People
that
out
exists.
there love Wolfram. Wolfram Squad, rise up.
No. You popping off for Wolfram Squad? Wolfram Squad.
Hashtag
Wolfram Squad.
Chase Bank.
That's where I met my wife.
The Chase Bank app.
That's right.
So, final thoughts on issues 79 and 80 of Spawn.
I wish they had made some better artistic choices because it made it lurid in a way that I didn't love, but I did really enjoy the pacing of it overall, and I enjoyed so much of the art was really effective. I like the era of Spawn that we're in. Like I said, it's very much like a very like kind of Loeb and Messner Spectre era.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool stuff. So overall, we harped a lot on the things that I didn't like, but I think even despite talking about that and trying to unpack the complicated nature of that, I think overall these are some pretty good issues. And this storyline overall has kept my attention and has definitely, like you said, maybe go like, what's the next issue?
Yeah. Similarly, while I wasn't as gung-ho about these issues as I was the previous two, these bring that story to a pretty satisfying conclusion, even though the execution of that conclusion is maybe not something that I love all the way through. I'm still happy that we're where we're at, if that makes sense. It still feels like even though the story's ended, we have a great next time on Spawn, like ready to go. It feels, and Todd kind of says it in this letter, like, I've handed this over to somebody that is giving me a lot more focus and a lot more direction, and we've definitely been feeling that, and I'm glad that other readers are enjoying it too. I'm loving where Spawn's at. It's just, as we celebrate our 50th episode, I'm excited that Spawn is barreling towards 100, and I don't feel like I know what's going to happen, and not that I ever have before, but I am excited for whatever is going to happen.
We know big things will happen in 100. So
Yeah.
this 20 issue stretch from here to there is going to be pretty interesting, and it's going to be exciting to
To
see how it
know
goes.
that big things are going to happen in 100, and for 80 to like end with like Billy Kincaid's back in some form. Uh-oh.
It's interesting to me. Something I'll point out real quick about this era of Spawn is that in my head, having not ever read a page of it like years ago when it was coming out contemporarily, sorry, I had in my head that it was like a bad era of Spawn and that it was just kind of junk. And that, like, particularly around when, like, I guess when Brian Holguin came aboard, no shade on him, there was just a perception in my head of like, yeah, okay, Spawn's just a fucking, it's just there. Reading it, this is some of the best Spawn has been. Like,
Agreed.
most consistently engaging and interesting. And yeah, I won't say I was wrong because I had a misperception, but yeah, I think digging into it now, this has been a great era of Spawn that we're in.
I think it's what we talked about way back in episode 1 is that our perception of Spawn was, oh, right, it's that book that's always on the shelf. It's always there.
Exactly.
It keeps coming out. It's always there. And I don't know a single person who reads it. And as we've done the show, we've grown to meet the Spawn community in various different ways and engage with them. And like, it's
There's a
very,
lot of people who
very
love
interesting.
Spawn.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's,
I love Spawn.
so do I. I'll read, there's a little like, hey, next time on Spawn, it says next month in issue 81, the sins of Spawn's past have come back to haunt him in a way he never could have imagined. After the starting revelations of last issue, when it was discovered that one of his very first acts as a Hellspawn unleashed a terrible evil upon the world, Spawn slips further and further into self-doubt. How can he fight an intangible malignancy that has no form? So, sounds like you were right, George. Also, come on, don't give it away.
Right?
And what's really exciting for us is we have another guest for our next episode, Rob Duenas of Spawn Fights Every Spawn.
Hell yeah.
Will be joining us to cover The Devil Within, issues 81 and 82. Super, super excited for that. It's going to be really, really fun. Rob has been very kind to our show, and we're excited to dig into it with him because he also
yeah, it's going to be a blast.
owns some original Greg Capullo pages. Not from this arc, but from a later one, but still very cool.
Very cool.
His art's really interesting. Before we head out, recommendations for our listeners, George.
Let's see. You know, I'm just going to say, I'll keep it simple this week. You should watch Severance Season 2 if you haven't started it yet. And if you haven't seen Season 1, it's really good. So watch Severance.
Great. I am going to recommend 1992's Fortress, a movie starring Christopher Lambert and Kurtwood Smith.
All right.
That is kind of weird. It's on Tubi for free.
Hell yeah.
It feels very much like I don't know what channel this was for you, but for me it was channel 11, and it would be like cartoons all day Saturday, and then it would be like, now get ready for the Saturday afternoon movie on WPix 11. And you'd be like, cool. And it was always like Double Dragon or like a Chuck Norris movie or like Predator 2. Like it was always like something like
something
that.
Kind of schlocky.
Fortress feels like that. It feels insane that it exists. It's like a prison film set in a weird dystopian future where you're only allowed to have one baby. And if you try to have more than one baby, they throw you in jail.
Wow.
And I can't say more than that because they'll start giving stuff away that should shock and surprise you in the best way. Like I watched this movie the other day. It's like 90 minutes long. And I was like, this movie is doing a million things. Everybody's fucking dialed in. And I am dialed in. And
I'll have to check it out. It sounds right up my alley.
I think you'd have a lot of fun with it. If you just want to fuck off for 90 minutes, you'll be like, yeah, this sucks, but it's the best. So that's my recommendation. Christopher Lambert, come on the pod.
Hell yeah.
On that note, if you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. We come out every single Spawntastic Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube as well. And, you can find us on social media, various social medias at Spawnography or at Spawnography Pod. If you got something you would like to say to us personally or about the show, you can send us an email at spawnographypod@gmail.com. If you send us a letter, we'll read it on the air, and it'll be like our own spawning ground, right? Thank you to Blake Whitlow for his Spawn reading order. Thank you to Freesound for helping out with the intro sound effects. Thank you to you for listening. And I have one last thing to say to you, George. For Todd so loved the world.
He gave his only begotten Spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.
Spawn!